funny, we thought that was a Protestant trait, but passing the basket
plate.
or the plate, yeah.
Yeah. How about that? Um, when 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 someone died, how was that treated in the community? What was the procedures that went on at that particular time?
There was a wake in the house,
Mm-hmm.
and that was they'd call it in the daytime they call it the corpse house, and then at night was a wake, and then the next evening they would take the remains to church and to stay in church overnight, and then the next day would be the funeral mass, and it would go to the cemetery.
So it's a lot the same as it is right now. That hasn't changed too much in
Yeah.
Hamlet, has it? No. What made you decide to come to the States?
I don't know. I always wanted to travel, and my ambition was to go to Australia. So I went to England using it as a stepping stone. I got a pal that was going to go to Australia with me, and the last minute he backs out, and I'm on my way to London to make preparations. So I thought, oh, I know it's a long way to go on my own. So I went to the Canadian place in the stud, and 2 months later I was in Canada.
Canada. And what was the year that you came?
1956,
Okay. Do you remember the date?
May the 17th,
May the 17th.
in Canada.
Yeah. And you landed in Canada. Where in Canada?
The first night we were in Quebec, and the second night was in Montreal. I waited till the next night when another boat came in with the guy that I worked with in England. He was from Kerry, and thinking we'd be together. He was going to stay in Montreal, and I had one day in Montreal already, so I said, that's it, I can't speak French. I'm out of here. So I went to Toronto.
So you went to Toronto. And by boat, did you say?
No, by train from Montreal.
Okay. And when you came to the States, how did you travel?
By train too.
By train? No, I mean when you left Ireland, sorry.
When I left Ireland.
Did you take a plane or a boat or?
A boat, yeah.
A boat? What boat did you take? Do you remember?
I took the boat from, I guess it was Dunleary to Holyhead.
Mm-hmm. And then
Holyhead is in Wales.
Yes, right. And then from there, did you take a plane? How did you get from there to Canada?
Oh, I got from England. I left Liverpool and went to Canada. Booked my passage to Montreal.
And what boat did you take? Do you remember the name of the ship?
Devaney. It's in the scrap heap now.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how long did it take to come over on that?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you enjoy it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
It was terrific.
Was anybody else that you knew going with you? I mean,
No.
You just
nobody.
met people on board?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like? What was the day on board when you were coming over?
It was like a vacation. I really didn't think I have no job, I don't know where I'm going, but I'll live every moment.
Yeah.
That's it.
What was it like when you said to your family you were going to leave? How did they react to that?
They thought I was crazy.
Did they?
Yeah.
And your parents were both living at that time?
Yeah. I said, don't worry about it. When I go to Canada, I'm going to go in the bush. I'm going to make a fortune. Or if not, I'll be back. One way or another, I'll be back in 2 years.
And were you true to that?
I didn't make a fortune, and I didn't go back either.
You didn't go back 2 years later? No?
No, I went back about 4 years later.
4 years later. Yeah. Yeah. And when you went back 4 years later, did you stay long?
I did. I stayed about a month that time.
Yeah.
That was my first real vacation and all that time.
Yeah. Wow. When you got here, what was your first impression of the United States?
Well, I came to the United States from Canada for 2 or 3 visits. Once was for St. Patrick's Day.
Where?
In New York.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was, I couldn't wait to come back.
Oh, that's when you decided you wanted to be in the United States then?
Well, not really. Not really. I didn't decide on coming back. It was good to come back for the fun. The first day, actually, I was in Toronto. was a holiday, and the fellows I had met over the few hours I had on Saturday nights, there's a great football match down in Buffalo on Sunday. So I did it in Buffalo on Sunday by car.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there was no problems crossing the borders?
No.
No. Did you come with a green card?
I did. I didn't have a visa. I said I was Canadian, so
They let you Canadian with that accent.
I thought I was from Nova Scotia, so they have a...
So you didn't come out to someone then? You didn't?
No, I didn't, no.
You just, wow, that must have been such a change. And you immediately found Irish people up in the Toronto area?
Well, the night before I left England, a fella came to the place where I was staying, the landlady, and he said he was my cousin from Ireland. I says, my cousin from Ireland? I don't have any cousins in Ireland. They're all in America. Well, I didn't say that to her. I says, who could this be? And he was a cousin of my cousins. That's how it was.
Oh.
And he knew I was going to Canada, and he knew that the place was an ideal spot for him to start off. And he said, he gave me a list of addresses in Toronto, people that he went to school with. I said, you went to school with them. These guys won't know me. They never heard of me. He says, take these names. You'll find they might be useful. So when I got to Toronto, it was a Saturday. Sunday was a complete shutdown. Everything was closed in those days. Mm-hmm. The blue laws, you could get nothing. And Monday was a bank holiday or a public holiday. So I couldn't do anything until Tuesday. So I said, well, I have 3 days really. This was early on Saturday morning. So I checked my bags in the locker room down at the station, and I said, I took out my little bunch of addresses. I started calling and checking them out. So that's how I met them. And I still have those friends yet.
For heaven's sake. Yeah, so he gave you some good advice, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, that was good. And then you decided, when did you decide then to move to the States, to leave Canada and come to the States?
Well, I worked on the St. Lawrence Seaway, the building of the Seaway. Mm-hmm. When that was over with, there was 10,000 men working there. And when that was finished, there wasn't another job like that anywhere around. And I knew there'd be 10,000 men looking for something that I'd be doing too. So the prospects were bad.
What kind of work did you do while you were building? What type of work?
Bulldozer working. Okay. Heavy construction. Uh-huh. Actually, the last job that I was on, they had Cornwall Island, and they put a slice down the middle where the ships could go up and down the middle of the island. That's the kind of work.
Wow. Heavy.
Ocean ships, yeah. So instead of one island, then we had 2 islands.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So that decided that you better start looking for something in the States?
Another bit of the story. I had a call from the same guy that I waited for in Montreal that came from England. He was from Kerry. He sent a message to me to get down to Montreal. They were hiring for the Jew line at the time. And he was going on it. So all I had was the information that was left for me, and I took off in the morning because I was working late shifts. Went to Montreal, which was 80 miles away, and found they had hired the last guy the day before. I kind of disappointed. I said, 80 miles out of my way for nothing. Yeah. So I went down to the American Embassy and got an application for a visa.
Wow. Who was your friend from Kerry? What was his name?
Jerry Stack.
And do you still see him?
No, I don't know if he's still alive or what. He spent years at the North Pole.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And so that fairly easily in those days you could get a visa to come into the United States?
Not easily, but you had to have, so long as you had dollars in the bank account, that you wouldn't be a burden on somebody.
All right. And you were able.
You didn't have to have anybody sponsor you then.
At that. And what years was that?
That was 1958.
Okay, so you did an awful lot in just a short period of time, because you had only been in Canada. What did you say, 57 or?
2 years, yeah.
2 years. And
56, 57, and left 58. Yeah.
And when you left, where were you planning on going when you left Canada? in the States? Did you have an idea where you were
I
going
came to New York, yeah.
You knew you would be coming to
Yeah.
New York, yeah. And did you already have some friends there?
I had my aunts, uncles, and cousins there.
Perfect, yeah. So were you able to get a job fairly quickly then?
No, I spent a whole month in New York before I got a job. I wore a pair of shoes out, walking.
Looking.
I walked Manhattan from one end to the other because I decided that's the only way to learn the geography of this town.
Yes.
Is walk.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't take the subways.
yeah. Wow. And what kind of work did you find then?
Well, funny, the first job I got in New York was with Railway Express. Delivery boy in Times Square. My first delivery with a truck was in Times Square. I said, boy, this is a long way from Lenadoon, huh?
Did you have a driver's license?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You'd learned to drive in Ireland?
Yeah.
In New York, Times Square. Whoa.
That's not. Before I came to the States, because I was working on the border, I went across one day to Malone, New York, and got a driver's license, New York driver's license. The fellow said that the customs says, "What's the purpose of your visit over here?" I said, "To get a driver's license." "What?" "Who's driving the car?" I says, "Oh, I have a Canadian license." "Oh, okay."
So you were lucky when you came over because you had some family, so you had people to go to and a place to live and that kind of a...
Yeah, my aunt came up to Toronto to see me when I first came. She said I was following in her footsteps. She had gone to England before she came to the States. She was a nurse in Manchester, I think.
Uh-huh.
Spent 5 years there.
And she was your aunt? Who was it?
My father's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your parents ever come to the States?
No.
No, they never came over. How about your brother?
He just came a year ago for the first time.
First time?
Mm.
Wow. Did you like it?
Yes, he did. But he was only here for 3 days, so.
3 days?
Yeah.
He wasn't even awake.
Yeah.
When you got to New York, how much of an adjustment was it for you to make?
Not that much, no.
No. Did you ever become a citizen?
Yeah.
You did. In New York? Or...
No, when I was in Connecticut before my time was ready for a citizenship. I got to be a citizen in Bridgeport.
Okay. Now, where in New York where'd you go to meet people and make friends? What kind of places did you hang out in?
Well, I went out with my cousin and his wife, and I went out with my cousin's wife's best friend. That's the one I married.
Uh-huh. So it was your cousin's wife's best friend.
She was the bridesmaid at their wedding.
Yeah. So that's how you were introduced to your wife?
Yeah.
Was through your cousin's wife?
That was on one of the trips I made to New York long before that.
Before you moved?
Yeah.
Oh, so then did that...
So I got my license and I got my girlfriend and I got a place to stay before I made a move.
Before you made the move. And how long before you and she married? What was your wife's name?
Eustace. Teresa Eustace.
Teresa Eustace, okay. And where was she from?
She was from Forest Hills, New York.
So, and any Irish connections did you
Yeah,
have back home?
County Limerick, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she was a real Irish American girl. She wasn't
Yeah.
an Irish
Third
woman.
generation, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so how long? When did you get married? When did you and Teresa get married?
Got married the following October.
October of what year?
1959.
59. Yeah. And so how did you get to Connecticut then? What made you decide to come to Connecticut?
A fella came down looking for a friend from home. He was from County Clare, looking for his friend. He was staying in the same place I was. But he was out, I didn't know where he was. He was in a bar someplace. And he said he'd wait till he come in. We got talking, and we talked for about 4 hours, and he never came back, this guy that he came to see. So he said, I was driving a bus at the time. He said, why don't you come to Connecticut? You know, you get work that be more in line with what you did in the Seaway. And he said he'd get all the particulars from me. His brother-in-law was dispatcher with the company. So I was expecting to hear from him every day. I was ready to pack this job in and go to Connecticut. And I didn't hear from him for, I think it was 6 months. It seemed like a long time anyway, 3 months. He called me up, and at that time I wasn't interested in coming. He says, I'll go down and pick you up. I said, I don't even know where Stamford is. You know? He said, I'll go down and get you. So he did. And then he brought me back. I was back in time to go on the night shift. I think 4 o'clock I started work.
As a bus driver? No,
As a bus driver. I was on shifts, you know.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they offered me the job, and they said I could start the next day. I said, no, I don't want to start the next day. He says, I thought you wanted a job. I said, yeah, but there's nothing wrong with what I got. And I went to give them a little notice.
Yeah.
Oh, he said, you're like that. What kind of notice do you want? I said, 2 weeks at least. So he looked at the calendar and he said, how about July the 20th, 1959? How does that hit you? I said, that's fine. That's how I came to Connecticut.
That's how you came to Connecticut. And who did you go to work for then?
Williamson Transportation in Stamford.
And what kind of job were you doing there?
Driving.
Driving again.
Yeah.
Back to driving.
Back to New York.
Driving back to New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So where did you live in New York? Where had you been living? What part of New York?
I lived in Brooklyn. I lived in the Bronx, and I finally lived in Flushing, Queens.
And where in Stamford? Where did you move to in Stamford?
I lived first place I lived was right by the Cove Pond, Weed Avenue. Then I lived on South Street, which is the Ambassador Building. That's gone now.
Uh-huh.
That's no longer there. That's the Stamford Advocate is in that building now. They knocked it to the ground and built it.
A new building. Yeah.
And then I lived on Crystal Street.
Yeah. Where did you go when you got to Connecticut to make friends? To meet people?
Well, the first people I knew here was Joe Blackwell and Eileen. They were the first 2 people I met in Connecticut.
And were they down in Stamford area at that time?
They were living in Stamford, yeah.
Yeah.
And the first few weeks was back and forth to New York, of course.
To the friends there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how we keep going back instead of, like when I came to Fairfield, I was going back to Stamford for a haircut.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
And was it like, I know there's a Hibernian Hall down in Stamford.
well, that's where yeah. Once I got involved there, I met John Maloney at a Holy Name Society meeting in St. John's. He asked me to join the Hibernians. I said, yeah, I'll think about it. He said, here's the application. I said, I don't have a pin. He said, here's a pin.
Got you right in. Huh?
So I was in before I knew where I was.
Yeah. And have you been a long time Hibernian then, Mike?
Since then, yeah.
And have you ever been president of the Hibernians?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. Here or in Stamford?
In Stamford.
In Stamford, yeah. So what kind of things did you do? I mean, was it mostly going to dances and things like that kept you involved in the...
Yeah, that was the biggest part of it. I think that generation was more for dancing than for... When I came to Stamford, I used to go to New Rochelle for dances, Irish dancing. That was the big attraction at that time. First time I went to New Rochelle was on a weekend that I said I was going to stay in Stamford and be quiet and get some rest. And I went to a bar, I was drinking, and this fella came. He was from County Clare, and all